A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, once again, Charles Gibson and George Stephanopoulos.
Back to the Philadelphia debate, the Democratic debate, just less than a week now before the Pennsylvania primary. And I would be remiss tonight if I didn't take note of the fact that today is the one-year anniversary of Virginia Tech. And I think it's fair to say that probably every American during this day, at one point or another, said a small prayer for the great people at that university and for those who died. It also, I suspect, makes this an appropriate time to talk about guns. And it has not been talked about much in this campaign, and it's an important issue in the state of Pennsylvania. Both of you in the past have supported strong gun control measures. But now when I listen to you on the campaign, I hear you emphasizing that you believe in an individual's right to bear arms. Both of you were strong advocates for licensing of guns. Both of you were strong advocates for the registration of guns. Why don't you emphasize that now, Senator Clinton?
Well, Charlie, on Friday, I was with Mayor Nutter, who's here, in West Philadelphia at the YMCA there to talk about what we could do together to bring down the crime rate that has ravaged Philadelphia. You know, more than one person on average a day is murdered in Philadelphia, and Mayor Nutter is very committed as the mayor of this great city to try to do what he can to stem the violence. And what I said then is what I have been saying. That I will be a good partner for cities like Philadelphia as president, because I will bring back the COPS program, the so-called COPS program, where we had 100,000 police on the streets, which really helped drive down the crime rate and also helped create better community relations. I will also work to reinstate the assault weapons ban. We had it during the 1990s. It really was an aid to our police officers, who are now, once again, because it has lapsed, and the Republicans will not reinstate it, are being outgunned on our streets by these military-style weapons. I will also work to make sure that police departments in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, across America, get access to the federal information that will enable them to track illegal guns, because the numbers are astounding. Probably 80% of the guns used in gun crimes are in the hands of that criminal, that gang member, unfortunately, people who are sometimes, mentally challenged because it got there illegally. And under the Republicans, that information was kept from local law enforcement. So I believe that we can balance what I think is the right equation. I respect the Second Amendment. I respect the rights of lawful gun owners to own guns, to use their guns. But I also believe that most lawful gun owners, whom I have spoken with for many years across our country, also want to be sure that we keep those guns out of the wrong hands. And as president, I will work to try to bridge this divide, which I think has been polarizing and frankly doesn't reflect the common sense of the American people. So we will strike the right balance to protect the constitutional right, but to give people the feeling and the reality that they will be protected from guns in the wrong hands.
Senator Obama, the District of Columbia has a law. It's had a law since 1976. It's now before the United States Supreme Court that prohibits ownership of handguns, a sawed-off shotgun, a machine gun, or a short-barreled rifle. Is that a law consistent with an individual's right to bear arms?
Well, Charlie, I confess I obviously haven't listened to the briefs and looked at all the evidence. As a general principle, I believe that the Constitution confers an individual right to bear arms. But just because you have an individual right does not mean that the state or local government can't constrain the exercise of that right. And in the same way that we have a right to private property, but local governments can establish zoning ordinances that determine how you can use it. And I think that it is going to be important for us to reconcile what are two realities in this country. There's the reality of gun ownership and the tradition of gun ownership that's passed on from generation to generation. When you listen to people who have hunted, and they talk about the fact that they went hunting with their fathers or their mothers, then that is something that is deeply important to them and culturally they care about deeply. But you also have the reality of what's happening here in Philadelphia and what's happening in Chicago.
Do you still favor the registration of guns? Do you still favor the licensing of guns? And in 1996, your campaign issued a questionnaire, and your writing was on the questionnaire that said you favored a ban on handguns.
No, my writing wasn't on that particular questionnaire, Charlie. As I said, I have never favored all-out ban on handguns. What I think we can provide is common sense approaches to the issue of illegal guns that are ending up on the streets. We can make sure that criminals don't have guns in their hands. We can make certain that those who are mentally deranged are not getting hold of handguns. We can trace guns that have been used in crimes to unscrupulous gun dealers that may be selling to straw purchasers and dumping them on the streets. The point is that what we have to do is get beyond the politics of this issue and figure out what, in fact, is working. Look, in my hometown of Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, we've had 34 gun deaths last year of Chicago public school children. And I think that most law-abiding gun owners all across America would recognize that it is perfectly appropriate for local communities and states and the federal government to try to figure out how do we stop that kind of killing.
Senator Clinton, you have a home in D.C. Do you support the D.C. ban?
You know, George, I want to give local communities the opportunity to have some authority over determining how to keep their citizens safe. This case you're referring to before the Supreme Court is apparently dividing the Bush administration. You know, the Bush administration basically said, we don't have enough facts to know whether or not it is appropriate. And Vice President Cheney, who you know is a fourth special branch of government all unto himself, has actually filed a brief saying, oh no, we have to, we have to prevent D.C. from doing this.
But what do you think? Do you support it or not?
What I support is sensible regulation that is consistent with the constitutional right to own and bear arms.
Is the D.C. ban consistent with that right?
I think a total ban with no exceptions under any circumstances might be found by the court not to be. But I don't know the facts. But I don't think that should blow open a hole that says that D.C. or Philadelphia or anybody else cannot come up with sensible regulations to protect their people and keep, machine guns and assault weapons out of the hands of folks who shouldn't have them.
Well, with all due respect, I'm not sure I got an answer from Senator Obama, but do you still favor licensing and registration of handguns?
What I favor is what works in New York. We have a set of rules in New York City, and we have a totally different set of rules in the rest of the state. What might work in New York City is certainly not going to work in Montana. So for the federal government to be having any kind of, blanket rules that they're going to try to impose, I think doesn't make sense.
But Senator, you were for that when you ran for Senate in New York.
I was for the New York rules. That's right. I was for the New York rules because they have worked over time. And there isn't a lot of uproar in New York about changing them because I go to upstate New York where we have a lot of hunters and people who are collectors and people who are sports shooters. They have every reason to believe that their rights are being respected. You walk down the street with a police officer in Manhattan, he wants to be sure that there is some way of protecting him and protecting the people that are in his charge.
Senator